Hello, my name is Bakari, like Bacardi, but without the D. But I'm just as fun at parties. And I'm a senior security engineer at Stewart Title. We are a customer of SailPoint, and I'm so excited and grateful to be on this stage presenting to you today. I've been doing different types of IT work my whole life, and I'm always looking for the next challenge. And I think I've found it with SailPoint. So today I want to show you how to implement version control in SailPoint IDN using GitLab. So I chose to present on this topic because when I first started working in IDN, I ran into a lot of issues finding basic information with setting up and running IDN, specifically using VS Code. And after getting set up, I found issues with getting that code to stay the same or being able to find code that I've changed before. So that brought me to my question of why do we need version control? Because you need it the same reason why you need to have control for if you're drawing a picture in, say, Photoshop or something, and you want to save it to a file and make changes to it. It's similar to that. Code's a little more complex than that. So that's where version control comes into play. So I struggled with finding help with some of the basics. I'm hoping this will help those of you who are just getting started with IDN, or even those of you who have already been doing IDN and you want to get started with the version control for your software, or if you're maybe just an operations or analyst and you're getting to the coding side of it, you're a junior developer. I'm hoping this will help you out a little bit. So there's different types of version control out there. I'm not going to go into all of them too much. I'm going to assume most of you know what version control is, or you've at least heard of it. For those that haven't, basically it's a way to manage your changes in a coding environment. It allows you to recover from changes you've made and roll back if necessary. So the one, as you can see on the screen, some of them are GitHub. We're going to be using GitLab just because we have a enterprise environment that I use it in, so that's what I'm familiar with. And the specific instructions I lay down, they won't necessarily work for every version control methodology out there, but the basics of what I show you will still apply. So just remember that you can use what works for your environment and throw out the rest. So during this presentation, I will also assume that you are using SailPoint IDN and that you have proper admin privileges to make changes to your local machine and version control method you plan on implementing. So by the end of this, you should have a good idea of how to sign up for a GitLab account, how to set up a GitLab repository with specific names for the repositories and branches, set up VS Code with the SailPoint extension and all tenants connected, if you haven't done that already. Connect to VS Code using GitLab. I was going to show you how to do that with SSH key, but it's a little more complex than what I want to go through, so we won't do that one today. We'll go through OAuth token and token authentication. You'll also learn how to store a local copy of your code onto your local drive so that you can export that and use that inside of GitLab. And we'll go through a live example where we change data on the tenant and we watch it change on the UI, and then we'll proceed to back up these changes in GitLab and see how this all works. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the first thing you're going to want to do is get into GitLab. Now, I am already signed in here, and there are different ways that you can get signed in. I have a couple of different things in here. I just signed in using a GitHub account just because you have a GitHub account, a GitLab account. It makes sense to keep them all tied together. And you'll want to create a new project. Prior to creating a new project, you'll probably want to have a group, since I'll just show you here. When you go to create a new project, you have different options from templates, all this stuff. We're going to keep it simple. It's going to ask you for the URL, and that URL is going to ask you for a namespace or a group. So that namespace is going to be either your username or it's going to be a group. So typically you'll want to go to groups first, and you'll want to make a group. You can click New Group, create a group, and call it whatever you want to call it. We'll just call it I just messed up and hit the back button and went the wrong direction. So let me just fix that in a second here. All right, so we'll go to New Group. We'll try this again. We're going to call it Super Awesome Blue Hair Guy. And the rest of the stuff you don't need to change, except for here, we'll be using this group. Just say just for yourself. Now, you could do my company or team. If you were planning on implementing this for your organization, you have a team who you want to use this group whenever they create repositories or whenever they create branches, you want them to have the group so you can do it as a company or a team. But for our examples, we're just getting the basics, learning how GitLab works. So we will just click just me, and we'll do the same thing here where it's just, I want to learn the basics of Git. So you'll create your group. Once it is created, we can now go back to that main page where we will create our new project. So when we create the blank project, again, you want to call it something relevant to what you're setting up in your environment. So something like, I wish that I was Goku. That's what you'd want to do. And you'll go ahead and pick your project URL, which is the new group that we created. In this one, it's the Super Awesome Blue Hair Guy. And we've got the slug, which will be the name of it. And you don't need to worry about your deployment target or any of that information yet because, again, this is just the basics. So leave the rest of this all default. Don't make any changes to that. So you'll create your project. This will go through and create a project. It'll initialize it for you, and it'll create a README file. And with that all done, we can now move on to VS Code. So we'll leave that there, let it bake for a minute. We'll come back to that. And we're going to head over to VS Code, where we are going to install some extensions that will let us use and access SailPoint. So again, I'm assuming you have VS Code installed already. Once it's installed, you can go click on extensions here. And in the extensions, the first one you're going to want to search for is SailPoint. There's a, oh, hold on. Didn't click the right one here. Oh, no, hold on. Okay, there we go, SailPoint. And the one you're gonna wanna install is this one right here by Yannick, super cool guy. This is very handy extension to use. This will allow you to see all of your tenant information from SailPoint right here in VS Code. So once you get that installed, you'll get this little IDN link here and this little IDN button, which lets you have access to creating a tenant. So what that'll actually look like is this right here. So you'll have this where you'll have to add a tenant, and this is the screen that you'll see when you're when you first get IDN installed, that extension installed on VS Code. So then when you go to add a tenant, the things you're going to need to add a tenant, you're going to need your tenant name, which is typically going to be your company name .SailPoint or IdentityNow.com. It'll be something like that. It's typically going to be your URL, the first part of your URL. So that's what you're going to click for adding your tenant. This is a good example up here, company.IdentityNow.com. Once you do that, after this stage, it's actually going to ask you for a personal access token, and then it's going to ask you for a client ID and a secret. So you'll need to go into SailPoint to make that. So I can show that real quick. So I'll go into my tenant here, and oh boy, give me a second. I did not sign into this. Got to be secure here. All right, so I'm gonna open my authenticator, and we're gonna go get the ID here to sign in, or get the code here to sign in. There we go. Perfect. All right, so we are signed in. We're gonna go ahead and click on not admin. You're gonna click on your name in the top right corner and click on preferences. Here you will go to personal access tokens, and here's where you will generate a personal access token. Now, keep in mind, when you come here to create this new token, once you create this token, you write out what it's for, for taking over the world. Once you do all that, you'll add your scopes and everything. It'll give you a client ID and a secret. That client ID you will still have. As you can see here, you can see mine, but the secret you will not have. So at the time that you get that secret, make sure you put it somewhere safe, LastPass, KeyPass, whatever you use, because you won't be able to see it ever again. You'll have to create a brand new token if you lose that secret. So you'll create this, make a good description so you know what it's used for, because you'll probably make more than one personal access token. So once you get that, you'll go ahead and input that back into here at this point where it asks for your add tenant, and it'll ask you for your client ID and secret. That's where this information will go. Once you do all that information, you will have your tenant added, and you will see it. It will end up looking something like this. So this is my tenant. You'll be able to see all your sources, transforms, workflows, rules. You'll be able to see everything right in here. Now, we can make changes straight from here, and those changes will show up in our tenant. We're not going to do that because the whole point of this is we want to have version control. We want to make sure that those changes get saved somewhere so that if it's a bad change, we can roll back to it. The way we're going to do that is we're going to do that through exporting. So what we'll do with this config here is what this essentially is. You'll right click and you'll click export config, and you'll run through a bunch here where it's going to ask you for multiple files, which files you want to export. You're going to do all of them because we want to have all the files that we're changing. We want to be tracking all of these files. So we'll go through and export all of these. And I've already done this, I'm not going to do it again, but you're going to select a folder location that's easy to get to, easy to remember. Once you've done all of that, all of this will show up here underneath Explorer. Explorer is going to be your workspace in VS Code, and this is going to have all of the files that you've exported. So with all those files exported, we can now make changes to those files. And as we make changes to those files, nothing is going to happen because all we did was export the files to our desktop. If we want to make changes to those files, or we want to see those changes actually be saved up somewhere, then we need to connect this to something. That's where GitLab comes into play. So we want to connect this up to GitLab so that these file changes are being synced over to GitLab. So to do that, there's a couple of steps that we have to do first. One of them is we need to do source control. So this is our source control here. What it might look like for you is it might look like this. So you might see download Git for Windows. This would mean that you don't have it set up on your VS Code yet, which is fine. All you have to do is click that button and it will take you to a download Git for Windows, and just download the latest version unless you know that you need to use a different version. But typically I would suggest just download the latest version. Once you get the latest version downloaded, run through all the defaults. You don't need to make any changes in there. Specifically, there is actually one change I do make when I do this. That's this one here. So I'll choose the default editor. I'll choose Visual Studio Code as Git's default editor, just because I try to do everything in Visual Studio Code because I hate bouncing from all the different command lines and all the different places. So I like to keep it all in one place. So I will make that change there. Otherwise, take all the defaults and just let it install, and you should be good with that. So once you're complete, you're going to go back to VS Code and you're going to click reload. So in that window here where you saw download Git for Windows, you'll see please reload. You'll go back to that window, you'll click reload, and it will reload it, and everything will show back up in here. It'll end up looking like this. So, repositories. That is incorrect. No, that's wrong. I said that wrong. it'll end up looking like this. Forget that last thing I said. This is what it'll actually end up looking like because you will need to open a folder or clone a repository to get access to the files that we've just exported. So in this instance, typically, if you already have a repository in GitLab, you can just clone that repository to VS Code and work on it from there. But in this situation, because we're still learning, you have folders that you've exported on your computer, and you're going to want to upload those to GitLab. So in this instance, we'll click Open Folder so that we can get access to all of our objects that we've exported. So that's what this ends up looking like. So we'll go ahead and click that. We'll open the folder. We'll select that folder. And then once we do that, we will end up with a local copy of our files. So that's how the local copy of the files end up here. Sorry about that. So we now want this information to be available to other devs in our org, and we want them to be able to make changes and track the changes that they make and do rollbacks if necessary. So this is where we're going to actually use GitLab. So to connect GitLab to VS Code, the first thing we need to do is install the GitLab extension. And so we'll go to the extensions over here, right here in this little corner here, and we'll type in GitLab. Once here, you'll see there's a lot of different GitLab extensions you can choose from. You're going to want this verified ownership one. This is going to be the verified GitLab workflow that we're using for this demo. And you'll click Install. When you install, it'll give you a cute little fox here that you can click on, and you'll get something that looks similar to this. So when this comes up on your screen, you're gonna tons of information. It might be overwhelming if it's your first time seeing it, but there will be different ways that we can connect to GitLab. One of the ways we can do it is through self-managed instances. That's typically in an enterprise environment, which is the type of environment I am in. And so that's going to typically involve using SSH keys and all of this stuff to get it set up that way. For that, you would click Add Account and go through that process. We won't be using that here. We'll be using the Connect to GitLab with OAuth because I also have an account on there as well. That process is a lot simpler. It's a click of a button. You let OAuth run all of the connections, and you authorize it. So that would typically run through, and you'd end up seeing a screen like this on your GitLab where you can authorize the connection to GitLab and VS Code. So if we go back to, yeah, we did that. Yeah, so it should end up looking like this. So after you click through all of that, you click the button. So you've signed into GitLab, you've clicked that button, and you've got signed in, and you've clicked Authorize. When you come back into VS Code, you'll see Open Source Control, so that, well, you might not. It might be connected. But if you do see this window where it says no Git repository available, it's because it's not connected to your source control. So we'll need to go through and do that, initialize the repository. So in doing so, you'll click Open Source Control, which will take you to your source control page here. And I've already done all of it, so you won't see it here, but there will be a button to click Initialize Repository. Once you initialize the repository, then you will be asked to, you should be able to begin doing syncing to the GitLab environment. However, I did run into some issues with that. One of the issues you might see when doing this is you might see this error message pop up. This just means that you don't have a username or an email configured in your Git. And you'll need to do this because when you're doing push or pull requests, it will require a name and an email to know who made the push-pull request. To do this, I actually will run through this real quick. Let's see if this actually works. I did try this and it didn't work last time, but we'll try it again. All right, so back in our code, you'll go to, it doesn't really matter where you're at over here on the left. What you're gonna do is you're gonna click on View. And what you should see at the bottom of your window is a terminal window. like this. This terminal window is where we type in commands and everything. I'm making it a little bigger so you can see it. The terminal window here is where we're going to type in commands to control our Git flows. So to fix that error message that we saw up on the screen, I'll throw it up there again. Make sure you configure your username, email. You'll come here and you'll type in git, and you'll type in global user.name, and then you'll put in the name that you want to show up when you are doing push or pull requests, such as Vegeta is terrible. So that happened. Just ignore that. It works. Trust me, I promise. So once you do that, it will add your name and your email to the global. Let me give you the command for the email one as well. So the email one, let me shrink the screen here so I get access to my view button again. Terminal. So the command for the email one is git -global user.email, and then you put in your email address. Again, I'm not sure why that global is coming up. It does work. I'm not sure why that's coming up, but we're not going to worry about troubleshooting it right now because I do have it working. So we'll trash that for now. So the next thing is we're doing, let's make some changes. So this should now be connected up to our source control. The way we can test this to see if it's connected up and we're able to make syncs and stuff is we'll go to our files and we'll make a change to one of our files. So in this instance, we'll go to, let's say we go to a source, and we'll go to here. Now, keep in mind, I am in the files. I'm not in IDN. This is the instance here. I'm not in the IDN instance. I'm not making changes here because version control is not tracking this. These files are just in VS Code. It's not being tracked. It's right here in the Explorer where these files are being tracked, and it's in here's how I am uploading them up to GitLab and pulling them down from GitLab. So when you need to make these, you want to make these changes happen on the IDN instance, you will need to make them here. So kind of a messy way to do it at the moment, but it will get you started with understanding version control. So we'll go here. The part I want to show you first before we move to the other part is showing you what the version control looks like. So, excuse me. So we'll click on the document. And right here we have this object U. I put that in there on purpose to be like an error. So we'll erase that out. Now we know that we've made a change. The way you can tell you've made a change is at the top there's this little dot here. That little dot shows you that there's changes that have not been saved. So we'll save those changes. When those changes save, what should happen is you should see a little source control, little number change over here. If we click on this, we'll see that our change showed up here. What you'll want to do is stage that change before we can push it to GitLab. You want to click this little plus button. That will stage the change. And then you want to type in a little message to denote what you did so that your teammates or your other dev knows why you're pushing this change in and what this change was. So in case tomorrow you get hit by a bus, they'll know what was happening. So we'll say we remove that object error. You could be specific as you want. I'm not sure if there's a line count. Some version controls have a maximum amount of characters that you can put into the comment field. I've been able to put pretty long sentences in VS Code, so I'm not sure what the character count is. Can look it up, but the important part is you put a comment there kind of explaining what you did, or a short synopsis of what you did, and then we're going to commit and push it, and we're going to see that it failed. That's part of it's part of code. Okay, I see. We'll commit it here. Yeah, all right, so it's still failing. All right, bear with me here. We're gonna all work on this together. All right, so reading the log file here. I'm sure what's most frustrating to all of you in chat right now is that you probably know what I did wrong, and I can't see chat. I can't see anything you're doing, so I'm sorry. You just got to bear with me while I stumble through it myself. Yeah, that's the right object field there. What did I mess up here? Bear with me here. I'm reading through the logs here. Merge base. Okay, so there it was. The problem was that I was on my wrong source control. I have two of them here. So if I minimize it, you can see there's two of them here. I was on this top one. That's the one that's broken. I was supposed to be on the bottom one. So, yeah, so it's going out now. So when this goes through, when it completes, we should see it update. Looks like it's going through. Okay, and we should see it update on our GitLab. So I do have, this is not the one I have. I do have an instance or a project that I've already set up in GitLab, or that I've already set up in GitLab. Yeah, it's right here. And if you see right here, source removed object, that's my comment showing the change that I made. And this just now shows that I just now did that. So this source is going to have the changes that I just made to that document. So that lets us know that our changes are being synced to GitLab, and we'll be able to pull these changes back down and do the rollback necessary to proceed with our development. So on the SailPoint side, the IDN side, if you want to see these changes, the next part is making this connect. So we have that version control process where we can make the changes on VS Code and then see those changes happen in GitLab. But now what we want to see is make the changes in IDN and then back that up. So typically, now your workflow can be anything. You could do anything with this. This is why I'm showing you the basic, and it's the building blocks, and you can take them and do with them what you will. Typically what I do is I'll make the change in the code base first, make sure it works, and then I will sync those changes to GitLab. Once all that process has been done, then I will feel comfortable going to IDN and making the change in IDN. Because if I break something in IDN, I know for sure I have it in GitLab. I don't like to do it in IDN first, because if it breaks, I don't have a backup of it. So, because you don't have it exported. So that's typically my workflow, is I'll make the changes in the code first, upload it to GitLab, then we'll go to IDN. So let's go to IDN. I'm going to have to log in again because the logout is so fast on this. So bear with me as I log in again here. All right. So we're back in here. Now, let's say we're working on this source here, and I'm working on this flat file. I'm uploading stuff into here, blah, blah, blah. I'm uploading some users into here. I've got all my users. I go to click on one of my users, and I notice this, oh, what is this? Identity has a processing error. What's that all about? So I click on it and find out it's having an attribute promotion, applying transform, blah, blah, blah. Oh, worker photo. Okay. So it's having an issue with the worker photo attribute. So let's say I did a bunch of troubleshooting and discovered, you know what, the worker photo attribute is just, it's not working. We need to disable it until we can do some more work on it. It's not going to happen. So to fix that, we're going to go to our code first. Before we make the change in IDN, we're going to go to the document, the source that we're on. We're going to find that worker photo. We're going to find that worker photo attribute. Looks like it's right here. Yep, photo of the worker as it comes from Workday. Now, typically you wouldn't do this. This is an example I'm giving of how we can modify this. And I'm just going to remove it. And if it breaks, you guys can all laugh at me. That's fine. So we're going to remove it, and we're going to save that. So again, we removed that. We removed that from our code. It saved up to here, source control. We'll go to our source control. We see the changes made here. We'll stage the change, and then we'll say removed worker photo as our comment. And we will commit that change so that it gets synced up. We'll wait for this outgoing to finish. And we'll wait, and we'll wait. Did you know, fun fact, that the next solar eclipse will be in 2044? So there's a little fun fact for you. It's still going. While that's going, I will go to IDN and find that source. So we'll go to sources and the Excel document source here, and we will look in here for a worker photo. So we're just going to make that same change here as well. Oh, it's not showing up. It must have already been removed. Huh. It should not have been removed that way. Oh, am I looking at the wrong thing? I'm supposed to be looking in the account, aren't I? I think I was looking at the wrong thing. Yep, I was looking at the wrong spot. You gotta look at the account to make that specific change. So then we'll come in here on the account, and we'll remove that worker photo as well. Now that we know that we have a backup of it in our, we know we have a backup of it. It's being pushed here. Oh, I never hit the sync button. That's why I didn't finish syncing. So now we know we have a backup of it. We're going to remove it from there, and then we'll hit save. That looks good. If we come back in here, that attribute should now be removed. So if we go back to this person, they'll probably still have this error here, which will be fixed by, if we want to see it for sure, we would go to our sources, go to the Excel document. We're going to go to our import data. Because this is a flat file, we're just going to download the file and see if that particular attribute was removed. So I've got it on my other screen here. Give me a second. All right, so here we go. So you'll see on this screen, this flat file has this required information in order to populate this user in IDN. And you'll see we have ID, name, given name, family name, email. You'll notice that worker photo is missing. It used to be right here, it's now missing. So that's how we made that change. And that's probably something typical you've done before, but now you know, oh no, I actually need worker photo. I need to recover that. Oh no, we never should have gotten rid of that. Oh, what do we do? Or more importantly, you find an error message and everyone's photos, you go away for a week, you come back and everyone's photos are all messed up. What happened? How do I know what happened? Well, that's the cool thing about this is you go into your GitLab and you start doing a little digging of like, okay, so what changes were made last week to photos? And you'll start looking for that source and you'll see, okay, there was the removed object on that source. We'll go back one more step so we can see that change, how it happened. So you'll see here on the source, removed that's a new word for you, removed worker photo. So now we know, oh, this is what happened on this source. So if we come here and we click on the source and we go to where the photo was removed, we can come here and we can recover that information. Now, I want to point out one more important thing before I end it. It's going to end a little bit earlier because I'm wrapping up here. But I do want to point out one thing is that typically setting this up, this is a very, very basic way that you would set all this up. Typically, you would not do any of this on a main branch. None of this would happen on a main branch. Like, absolutely not. It literally says protected for a reason. What you would do is you would create a sandbox branch or a development branch or another branch that all this code would take place on so that it could be validated before it's pushed to the main branch. And typically I have 3 branches. I have the main branch, and then I have the sandbox, and then I have a production branch. So I'm doing everything on my sandbox branch, making sure everything works. When it works, I'm pushing it up to my production branch, and then when everything works in my production branch, then I push it to main, which is the end-all be-all. But that's going to be for a different video, a different tutorial. That won't be for today. But thanks, guys, for letting me be on this stage. Thanks for letting me talk up here. Hopefully you don't mind me ending a little bit early, but I really appreciate being up here. Thanks for bringing me out, SailPoint, and until next time, I will see you guys later.